That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines, because I got to take the brand new Armies of the Soviet Union book to a tournament. And let me tell you boys, it was so much fun. This new Soviet book, it just feels right and it just plays right. So without further ado, let's fix bayonets and ooh-la-rah! Right into this thing. As is tradition, let us begin with a few thank yous. And the first thank you I have to say is to Warlord Games themselves, because they sent me an early copy of the Armies of the Soviet Union book. On top of this, they also sent me the special edition miniature that comes with the book as well. And it's a really cool miniature. I enjoyed having it in my army. But yeah, big thank you to Warlord for sending me the book early. It really gave me a chance to go through it, marinate in it, start working out what kind of army I wanted to build with it. And it let me get familiar with the rules so that when I actually went to this tournament, it felt like I had a good grip of the Soviets going into it. And that really helped me show off and get a feel for how this army operates on the battlefield. So big thank you to Warlord for doing that. It made such a difference. I also want to say a massive thank you to Dan, the tournament organizer for this event. And I actually want to say a special thank you here today because this tournament was a little bit different. You see, it was actually a charity tournament. Someone else in the Bolt Action group at Element Games, the group that Dan helped run, had actually gone through a recent tragedy of their house burning down, and they've been going through a difficult time with getting everything sorted with insurance and all that kind of stuff. So the point of this tournament was actually to help raise money for our mate Connor, who has been going through this whole ordeal. And I just think that not only is it great that Dan organized the event, but that he organized it to make sure that he was looking after one of his club mates. I think that makes such a difference, and it just goes to show the fantastic community we have with the Bolt Action group at Element. Quick side note here, Connor lost loads of his Bolt Action stuff in the fire, and Warlord Games actually sent a rep down to the tournament loaded up with loads of free boxes of Bolt Action. I think they gave him a Conflict 47 starter set, multiple starter armies, just to try and help him get back on his feet and also to help him get his hobby mojo back a little bit, which Warlord Games absolutely didn't need to do, but I think it really does go to show that they've got a great group of guys working over there at the Warlord Games headquarters. And last but certainly not least, I want to do a shout out to Element Games, who were the venue for this tournament. You guys have heard me shout out Element a lot over the years, and I will continue to do so because they truly are one of my favorite gaming venues. Fully stocked bar, incredible staff, and just a shop full of all the miniatures your heart could possibly desire. Great venue, definitely worth checking out. But with all of that said, now let's get into the tournament report proper, and we'll begin with the army list overview. As per usual, I have done a separate video really deep diving and getting into the nitty-gritty details of the list, and I'll make sure there's a link to that video down in the description below. But for those of you who just want a quick summary of what I was taking and some high-level thoughts behind it, this is what I was running. So I was running a 1,250 point army of the Soviet Union, and the first platoon I had was a rifle platoon. In there, as part of my extra selection, I had a Commissar with a pistol, 3 men with rifles, and then 1 extra model with the victory flag and the SMG, and that was the special edition model. So there's a couple of new things there, which is you can now take Commissars in big squads rather than just the usual sort of 1 to 3. You can now actually have up to 5 people in the squad, which actually makes for it being quite a chunky unit, and importantly, it kind of feels like it's a proper unit now rather than just like a tax unit. You know, it's not just a dice in the bag, it's a dice in the bag, and also when you activate it, it can achieve stuff. On top of this, I had the victory flag, which is a brand new piece of special equipment the Soviets can take, which means that every model that is within line of sight and within 12 inches of the model with the victory flag gets +1 morale. To be clear, it's only infantry and artillery. It doesn't affect your tanks and stuff. So what I like about putting this on a Commissar is the Commissar is obviously shooting people to make them reroll orders, but he's now also conferring a morale bonus as well with the victory flag. Now, there are a number of units that can take the victory flag. It's specific in the book which ones can do that. You can't put it on any unit, but I find the Commissar to be quite a good unit for it because it feels right and it feels thematic. Next, I had a platoon commander, and there were 4 men with rifles in his squad. And again, I took this just to show off that, hey, look, you can now take big platoon commander squads. I then had 4 units of 12 riflemen, all inexperienced, all green, and this was just to create the Soviet Horde. Hoorah! And that was what I was going for. I really wanted to embrace that Hollywood style, enemy at the gate style, Soviet Horde, and that was the vibe I was going with the army. Supporting this pretty hefty rifle platoon, I mean, I think there's 58 models in that one platoon alone, which is pretty crazy. I had a heavy weapons platoon consisting of an inexperienced platoon commander with 2 mortars, one of which had a spotter. Now, it's been a little while since I played regular bolt action, and I had forgotten there'd been an FAQ where your spotter can only now spot for 1 team at a time. So this was a little bit of a mistake. It was fine, don't worry. It got picked up literally in the very first game and wasn't a problem whatsoever. So it did mean that one of my mortars tended to have to be a bit more exposed, and one of them was able to take advantage of the spotter, but it wasn't a problem in any way, shape or form. But I thought I'd mention it now so that when you guys are looking at this list, you can learn from my mistake. And then last but not least, I mean, I had to do it. It's the Soviets. You've got to take a fleet of T-34s. And so I took 3 T-34 85s, all regular. And I made one of them the command tank, but I didn't need to pay for it thanks to the new lack of radios special rule that the Soviets get, which means you can get your command tank for free, but he only has a 6-inch radius rather than a 12-inch radius. And I really like that because I'm a cheapskate and I like saving points where I can. And there you go. That was the list. Big horde of conscripts, bit of indirect fire support, and a pretty hefty armoured platoon. By the way, if you want to be able to copy this list, I'll make sure that the text version of it is in the description. But with all that said, now let's move on to the lay of the land. So what was the format of the event? Well, it was a 1-day, 3-round RTT. As for army list composition, it was 1250 points, and you were allowed a maximum of 18 order dice, and you were only allowed 1 of each platoon max. So you couldn't like take a couple of cheap rifle platoons, then unlock loads and loads of armor and run sort of tank spam or anything like that. It's very much designed to be a nice, well-rounded tournament. There was also a bit of a theme around the event. You see, Connor, the guy whose house had burned down, who this tournament had been put on to raise money for, loves his British powers and he loves a bridge too far. So the theme for the event was actually Arnhem. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Mordian, you brought Soviets to this event, and as far as we can tell via history, the Soviets weren't at Arnhem. That is absolutely true, and don't worry, I made sure that I spoke to Dan before the event and I asked him, was I okay to bring this, and was I able to sort of get an early go with the new Soviets, because this was when the book hadn't quite come out yet. And he went, bro, it's absolutely fine. It's sick that you've got the new book already. Bring it down. We can all have a bit of a look at it and we can see how the new Soviets play. And I'll stick you on the Axis team. And so it helps balance out the numbers anyway. So don't worry. I wasn't that guy turning up with a completely inappropriate army for the event. The theming was more just around the missions. So the missions were, you had one where you had to capture a bridge, one where you had to go down a highway, one where you had to do a defense of a city. So it was more, the missions were themed in that way, but the TO was very chill. And the whole point of the event was that it was a chill day where we all got to play some games and, you know, raise some money for a good cause. However, even though this was a charity event, it was still a tournament at heart. And so overall, I would describe the event as semi-competitive. Look, we're playing at a tournament. People want to put their best foot forward. We're trying to bring more themed armies and stuff. But at the end of the day, there's still the element of win and lose. There were a few players that had brought more competitive lists. There are a few people that were just trying out bot action for the first time in a competitive sense, and the group that we've got at Element Games is overall generally quite experienced and kind of knows what they're doing. So it was semi-competitive, but the sportsmanship was particularly high. But with all of that said, now let's get into the video proper. I know why you guys are really here. Let's get into the games. So game number 1, and I get paired into Mark and his Airborne. Now, Mark is not an experienced bolt action player. He's played about 4 or 5 games before coming to this tournament, but he is an experienced Age of Sigmar player. And so it was really cool to chat to him a little bit about Sigmar, and, how it is and all that kind of good stuff. And, him talking about his experiences with bolt action and comparing it with Sigmar. And we just generally had a really good game, really good chat, and we got on really well. Now, Mark's list consisted of a rifle platoon, a heavy weapon platoon, and an artillery platoon. In his rifle platoon, he had 3 big squads of paras, and all of them were equipped in a pretty similar manner. There was an SMG on the sergeant, and then he had a light mortar and an LMG in most squads as well. Really, really cool. I did not know you could take light mortars in British para squads, and it's definitely something I'm looking into with my own army going forward. He then had a medium machine gun team, a medium mortar team, and a medium anti-tank team. These are obviously split between the artillery platoon and the heavy weapon platoon. And then he had a Bren carrier, which had a couple of Piat teams in it. And he had a few officers scattered about, including having a forward artillery observer over here. The mission for Game 1 was hold until relieved, with both sides trying to capture the central bridge. Deployment was sectors, aka table quarters with a big circle in the middle that you couldn't deploy into. And speaking of deployment, I just went for a big old infantry wave. Just put my infantry where I could, trying to get them some cover, and then just threw my tanks down, hoping that I would be able to weather the medium anti-tank gun as best as possible. I will say I have been playing a lot of Conflict 47 recently, and I do feel this is a bit of a Conflict 47 style deployment because I have gone pretty aggressive with it. But hey, speed, violence, aggression, always got to have the momentum. That's what I wanted from this game. And I had my mortars well hidden at the back here. But everything else is basically on the ready line, ready to go and just rush that bridge. As for Mark's deployment, he had a unit of paras here, behind this heavy cover, a unit of paras here, behind this heavy cover, and then a unit of paras in the middle in the wheat field, getting light covers. Quite an even deployment, 1 elite squad in each area, left flank, middle, right flank. And then he had his support units just covering various angles. He had his forward observer over on the left flank, though, which is a really good place because it could chill out in the forest and see the bridge, and that's a great place to be able to call in that artillery. But with everything deployed, it was time for turn 1 and to start pulling dice. And here we are at the end of turn 1, and I have to say, I've been aggressive. I've been pushing. Definitely had my Conflict 47 brain on in this game. So what I did is I went Billy Big Bollocks. I was like, you know what? I'm going to just push my tanks just onto the bridge. He's only got 1 medium anti-tank gun. It's fine. I'll have heavy cover. I'll be all right. And so what I did is I secured the bridge early on with this infantry squad. And my thinking was that I could then roll the tanks onto the bridge because then it'll be mine. And in order for Mark to take it back, he'll need to basically kill everything that's rolling forward, and with 3 T-34s, that's a lot of armor he's got to chew through. And that was essentially my first turn, just moving the infantry forward, clearing lines of sight for the tanks, securing the bridge, and I had some infantry get inside this building here. And I did manage to do some damage to the medium anti-tank gun. I think I managed to kill 1 of the crew and then put 3 pins on it. But that was really the extent of the damage that I did. As for Mark, he very quickly identified what my plan was, and I suspect he had a similar plan to me, just albeit without the tanks, because he also went very aggressive. You see, he might, like I said, he might not be an experienced bolt action player, but he's an experienced tournament player. And you can tell that straight away with the way he's able to look down at the game, able to analyze the situation and work out how to approach a mission in a game that he really hasn't played a huge amount of. So I was very, very impressed with how Mark played, considering this was his first ever tournament game. And so he's pushing these infantry around here. He's pushing his main infantry blobs forward here. He did go pretty aggressive against my T-34 because I did an advance order of the T-34 over here. And he actually got both Piat teams. He drove his Bren carrier forward, got both Piat teams out, but neither one was quite within the 12-inch range. So obviously my job is to try and pick up all of this anti-tank as quickly as possible going into the next turn so that my tanks have got supremacy of the battlefield. However, that did not quite go to plan, as at the beginning of turn 2, the British artillery barrage came in. You see, this red dice here represented the artillery marker that had been called in turn 1, and then at the start of turn 2, Mark rolled, he got the 4+, and the artillery came in. And what happened is basically every single unit in my army received 3 pins. It was insane, man. It was absolutely insane. So what Mark kept doing is rolling like a 1 to 5 on the artillery result, which means that you take D3 pins. And then he would roll like a 5 or a 6 on the number of pins being caused. And it was really funny because he never actually rolled a 6 on the artillery result, which would have been the big heavy howitzer shell coming in. So he didn't do any actual damage to me, but you can see so much is pinned up. These guys have got 3 pins. These guys have got 3 pins. This tank's got 3 pins. This tank's got 3 pins. This unit's got 2 pins. The Commissar's got 4 pins because it got hit by the sniper at the end of last turn, but not wounded and all that kind of stuff. By the way, quick shout out, the sniper did nothing basically all game. Typical sniper. It's shooting an inexperienced platoon commander, inexperienced commissar, and I think it didn't get either one of them. But you can just see loads and loads and loads of pins, which is going to make my turn 2 basically a turn of rallying, which is essentially what happened in turn 2. Most of my units spent the game rallying, or there was a platoon commander nearby that was able to get them into the fight and doing stuff. But by and large, we're talking rally central. Few exceptional moments are this squad getting absolutely obliterated from various sources of firepower. This tank here failing its order check because I tried to be cheeky with it. I had a platoon commander nearby. I thought, oh, I'll be able to pass it on like an 8. I didn't. I just reversed backwards. That was stupid. And then I was able to get this squad out of the building and able to get them onto the bridge because I knew I had to try and keep this under my control. And this squad here just rallied. As for the Brits, you can see they're just pushing forward. The Piat team pushing forward. Still not quite. I think they were actually in range of the tank here, but they just didn't get the hit. They needed a 5+ to hit. And the rest of the British forces pushing forward. And you can see the Brits are not taking very many casualties at all. And I've lost a full squad here, and the Brits, I think, have lost a couple of crewmen from an anti-tank gun. So the Brits are really pushing forward, being really aggressive, keeping the Soviets on the ropes, but the Soviets are just throwing wave after wave of infantry at this bridge. First turn, threw a wave of infantry, secured it. Second turn, put another unit of infantry on it, just keeping it under our control. So here we are at the end of turn 3, and you can see the Soviets are getting chewed up. A lot of my infantry has been thinned out, and I still have 3 squads left, but they've all taken casualties. This one's got 7 men in it, this one's got 5 in it, this one's got about 5 or 6 blokes in it. I think some are hidden behind the building. I'm having to actually bring my platoon commanders and commissars into frontline service just so that I can make sure that I'm keeping this bridge under my control. And also, I actually had a really big foobar moment in this game, in this turn, when this tank failed a 1-pin order check and actually got friendly fire, and it shot this tank here, hitting on a 2+, and my opponent missed with the shot. Oh, I was very, very, very lucky. Woohoo! Very lucky indeed. But the Brits aren't all having it their own way. I have essentially neutralized this medium anti-tank gun. I think I finish it off towards the end of this turn, beginning of next turn. And I've also taken out one of the Piat teams as well. So I'm doing various damage to some of the other units here and there. So I'm doing a little bit here, but my main focus is get rid of the anti-tank and then just try and secure the bridge, which is exactly what I am able to do in turn 4. So turn 4, I managed to kill the medium anti-tank gun, and I'm able to kill the last Piat team. And all of my tanks start doing as they're told, and I start rolling them onto the bridge. I do actually lose one of my T-34 in turn 4. The Piat team managed to take it out before I managed to finish off the Piat team. But by the end of turn 4, I have got tanks on the bridge. I've still got about including all various officers and stuff, I've still got about 15 to 20 infantry just piling onto that bridge, and so it's now pretty securely under Soviet control. Unfortunately, at this point, we did run out of time on the round. It was a case of me and Mark were just having a good chin wag. We weren't really worried about the clock. It was the vibe of the event. It was a charity event, so we were just playing for fun and all that kind of stuff. And so we did get to turn 4, and it was the end of the game. So we didn't get a turn 5 or turn 6. Now, because of the fact that right now at this point in the game, I have won because I've got the bridge under my control. However, due to the fact that we'd had a very good game, due to the fact that we hadn't finished the game, due to the fact that there was a really strong chance that I was going to lose all of my infantry and the Mark was just going to be able to do successive infantry assaults against my tanks. And if he gets lucky, he might be able to set one on fire and take it out and all that kind of stuff. And also a little bit due to the fact that I'm playing fucking Soviets at Arnhem. And do you know what I mean? I definitely need to be, taking that into account. Because of that, we ended up just calling it a draw. We called it a draw. It was a gentleman's game, and on a serious note, there was a real chance that I would lose my infantry, and then via just successive assaults from Mark's big bricks of powers, he is able to get lucky and take out these T-34 85s. But winning and losing with this game really for me just didn't matter. It was a case of just having fun, showing off what the Soviet Horde could do. And there were already some things about this book that I really liked that were showing through. So the victory flag saved my ass a number of times. Like just, hey, this infantry squad, I've got a Commissar nearby. It's on, if they've got a couple of pins on them, so they're going to be like, oh, leadership 6. But then I've got the flag, which makes them leadership 7, and then the Commissar can shoot one, so they've got the reroll. So the Commissar victory flag, I really, really liked that combo, and it definitely came up quite a lot in this game. Apologies for the slightly anticlimactic end to game number 1 with only getting to turn 4, but do not worry, rest assured, in game 2 and game 3, we get to the full and natural end to both games. And so, speaking of game 2, let's head over to that now. So game number 2, and I play against Dan and his Germans. Now, Dan is someone who I have a lot of time for. I've been fortunate enough to play a few times with him in the big apocalypse games that we play, and he's just an absolute gentle and lovely bloke. Today, he was running a really interesting list, one that I actually really liked, and in the future, I may poach for my own use. He had a rifle platoon with 3 squads of veteran infantry, a machine gun in each one. And of course, he had a platoon commander, which was also veteran and had a couple of blokes with him. He then had a forward artillery observer, which is not something you see very often with the Germans, but I quite liked it. But what really tickled my fancy was his armoured platoon. It was 2 Pumas. Now, already straight away, I like that. Medium anti-tank guns on a light chassis, bit of recce thrown in there. It reminds me a little bit of when I take my 2 Panzer IIIs, but trading off the extra MMG for the recce and the wheels is kind of interesting. So double Puma, never encountered that before, and he also had a walking Stuka, which is the multiple rocket launcher, and then he also had the Wirbelwind, which is the 4 light autocannon Panzer IV. And overall, I just really liked this armor platoon because it felt like it was a bit different, not something you see every day, but it also felt like it was well thought out with a lot of different units available to cover different bases. You know, you've got the Pumas with the anti-tank guns and the speed, you've got the Walking Stuka with the big HE, and then you have got the Wirbelwind, which is going to be laying down loads of anti-infantry fire. Oh, one other thing I forgot, he did have 2 light mortars in his rifle platoon. The mission for game number 2 was envelopment. One person was going to be the defender deploying on the board, one person was going to be the attacker coming on in first wave, and the attacker also got a prep bombardment. We rolled off to see who was going to be the attacker and the defender, and I won the roll off, and I chose to be the attacker because I feel like with my list, it's an attacking list, and also it's kind of funny to try and have a whole bunch of inexperienced infantry like charge across the board. So Dan deployed his units down first, and he went for a Puma and an infantry squad and the Walking Stuka and another infantry squad with the light mortar on the right flank. And then in the center, he had his air observer, a Puma and another infantry squad. And then covering his left flank, he had the Wirbelwind, the platoon commander, and he also had a light mortar. With all of his units down, it then came to the prep bombardment, and well, very quickly, we both remembered why we hated this thing. You see, in Bolt Action version 2, this was in like every single mission, and it was a nightmare. And they don't have it in every mission for version 3. In fact, it's a very much an optional rule that you can include. And yeah, there's a reason why people don't really play with it anymore, because how it works is I roll a dice for each one of Dan's units at the beginning of the game. And on a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 5, they take some pins. It can be from like 1 to 2 pins. But on a 6, they actually get hit by the bombardment. And you end up getting hit by, I think it's a pen 4 hit on your top armor if you're a vehicle. So we rolled through, and you can see that I managed to get some pins all across the line. But on the left flank, I got 2 hits. The first one was against the light mortar team that was in this forest, and I hit the light mortar team, killed one of the crew. This caused the other crew member to panic and break and flee off the board. So that's 1 unit already down. And then I hit the Wirbelwind. And because it's hitting top armor, I get pen +5 against it. So I managed to get a penetrating hit. And then, because it's open topped, I get +1 to the damage table. And so I rolled and was able to knock it out. So before the game has even started, Dan has lost 2 units, one of which is arguably one of his best units in his entire army list. And in a funny sort of way, the game was kind of over at that point, because envelopment is about running units off the board. And if you look here, I've got this forest, and then this hill, and then this forest. The majority of Dan's forces are now over on this side. So what I could do is I could run all of my units on this side of the board and just run them off the board. It would be very, very, very easy. And there would be very little that Dan could do to really stop it. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. Frankly, that's not my style in general. And we're playing at a Bolt Action event. Bolt Action is my fun game. It's the one that I like to play a little bit more casually. So if I want to play a cutthroat event, I'll play Warhammer 40k when I'm feeling in a proper spicy competitive mood. But I want to play Bolt Action to have fun, and I want both players to have fun with this event. And Dan and I both knew, like, we were like, well, he was like, well, that's over then, the game's over. I went, yeah, man, but that's kind of rubbish. So what I did is I said, you know what I'm going to do, man? I'm not going to run everything down one flank. I'm going to attack like a Soviet commander would attack, and I'm going to attack on a wide front. And that way, I'm not just going to run everything off the board. I have some stuff that will come on the left flank, but the majority of it is going to come on the middle and on the right flank. Because Dan's a mate, there's no pleasure in just beating him in a one-sided game, and it'd be much more fun if we could just actually just play a game. And also, remember, like, this is a charity event. The whole vibe is we're here to throw dice and have a good time and raise money for a good cause. And so I made the decision that I wanted to make a game of this. And so here we are at the end of turn 1 when all of my guys have come piling onto the board. And you can see I have not just yeeted everything down this flank. I mean, it would have been so easy if I'd literally taken all 3 T-34s, put them down here and just been like boom, 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 just all the points in the bank. But no, that's not my way. And so instead we went for a classic wide Soviet offensive, just trying to attack the enemy on all fronts and break through when their overstretched defenses collapse. And let me make something absolutely clear. I may have gone for a wide deployment or wide first wave, but I was still playing properly. And this is what I said to Dan. I said, look, I'm going to come on my first wave in a thematic way, but I'm still going to try and play this properly when it comes to the tactical decisions. So strategically, I've played a bit more narratively, but tactically, I'm still going to make the right choices. And a good example of this is in turn 1, I brought these T-34s on over here, and I was actually able to knock out the Walking Stuka, which was actually one of Dan's other best units in his army. But overall, but that was basically all the damage that I did. And I didn't get it all my own way. You know, this squad of infantry down here, because this is one squad, and then these blokes here are the platoon command squad. So I actually took some casualties on the infantry here, and Dan ordered his bombardment down to come in turn 2, and then I was able to knock out the Walking Stuka. But that was my damage, and I have to say I was very happy with that turn, not gonna lie. Being able to take out 2 of the biggest anti-infantry threats here does make a really, really big difference. But a lot of turn 1 was just moving onto the board, some pot shots back and forth. Turn 2 is when things really started heating up, although I'm sure at this point Dan already felt like it was hot enough. Now, Dan's bombardment came in, and he actually did quite a good job. He didn't get any direct hits, but he got lots of pins. And so you'll notice that most of my infantry around here spent the turn just trying to rally those pins off. Now, interestingly, my T-34 here actually failed. It failed its rally check, and it went down, which when a tank goes down, it actually reverses backwards. So it's perilously close to reversing off the board. And other than that, I began my advance upon the Germans. Upon sight of the enemy, I advanced, sir. That's my style, sir. And so I started pepper potting my T-34s up. One would move up and then fire. The next one would then move up and then fire. It was very much like pepper potting, advancing up and covering each other. And I was trying to take on this one Puma with these 2 T-34s, but I hit it a couple of times, but I didn't manage to actually penetrate its armor, which just got unlucky rolling on the damage, like rolling like a 1 to damage like both times. So yeah, got a few hits, but unfortunately didn't quite get any damage on it. But the infantry squad up here starts moving forward, and I'm getting myself ready for a bayonet charge on the artillery observer here. Now he's just a dice at this point. He's already called his artillery in, but still want to try and get rid of him. He's still in the way. The first position in the German defensive line, the OP, the forward OP, that needs to be cleared out before we can get to the main defensive line. I then also began the great flanking maneuver of the mortar team, because I thought it'd be funny. I thought doing a flanking maneuver with what's normally meant to be static mortar team was quite amusing. So it ran on turn 1, then it ran up here turn 2. But it was also a bit of an example of what I could have done. Can you imagine if there was loads of just running up this flank? Yeah, who knows? It might have worked, but then bear in mind, you have to take into account that the Walking Stuka could have potentially hit a lot of units if I'd done that. So maybe it ended up balancing out overall anyway. Going into turn 3, and both sides really do start getting a wiggle on now, because we've removed all of the pins from the preparatory bombardment and from Dan's artillery. So things are now getting a wiggle on. And I do on the right flank, this T-34 does a fire order but misses, and this T-34 goes for an advance. So we're trying to take that ground, moving up. But again, I missed the Puma that time, and I'm firing my main guns into the Puma, and I'm firing my medium machine guns into the mortar team, and I'm just killing nothing. But I can't really complain. Over here, I unfortunately don't manage to get the bayonet charge off. Dan gets the first couple of dice activated on me, and he gets lucky with like his mortar hitting and with a few other units coming on. And so I lose about half of the conscripts, and then I tried to go for the bayonet charge, but unfortunately I don't quite manage it. Even with my Commissar shooting a guy and with the victory flag in sight, I just don't quite manage it. What's kind of interesting though, and something that I want to mention now, but be aware that it's something that becomes quite prevalent throughout the entire game, is I actually got to feel I think it's called For the Motherland. It's a special rule where it is called For the Motherland. The other one's Great Patriotic War. It's For the Motherland, where if you're within like 12 inches of an enemy unit and you're inexperienced, you can roll a dice, and on a 4+ you lose a pin. And this started coming up a lot, and I actually ended up losing a lot of pins from it. It's a rule that at first I completely dismissed, but in an army like mine, actually it was very helpful. And what's kind of interesting is in this game in general, I actually got to feel every single one of my relevant Soviet special rules. The victory flag was in play, the Commissar was in play, defend the motherland was in play, Great Patriotic War was in play. Every single special rule that I had basically came up in this game, and every single time they came up, it was actually quite clutch. And so this game really, really hammered home to me that the Soviets, they have so many of these army rules, and a lot of them are quite niche, but you actually do end up encountering every single one in a good game about action like this. And in the first game, I hadn't really felt my army special rules all that much. It'd just been a case of, oh, look, I've got the flag and the Commissar, and that was kind of it. But in this game, I really, really got an appreciation for it. And honestly, this game kind of made me fall in love with the Soviets, and I kind of want them to become my go-to faction. I've been a German main for a long time, but this game really made me want to become a Soviet main just because of how useful my army special rules felt. But elsewhere in the turn, you can see that I've begun pushing forward. So I got my big line of conscripts. There's 2 squads here, and they've moved forward to hold this wall, and then they're going to try and break through round here and sprint off the board. The great flanking medium mortar team is still going, and my officer Boris is also pushing forward as well. Interestingly though, Dan's actually moved quite a good counter unit into position. This platoon command squad here is all armed with SMGs and assault rifles, and if I don't get the first dice in turn 4, it can actually move in and intercept this unit and kill it, which would actually deny me quite a lot of points. Fortunately for me, we go into turn 4, we pull the first dice out of the bag, and I do manage to get the medium mortar team off the board first, which is great. That's a whole bunch of victory points in the bank. Then we go over to Dan. He got the next dice, and he was able to kill my platoon commander here. So he got one of them. If I'd been lucky, I might have been able to get the first couple of dice. And maybe that would have put Dan in a bit of a tricky position, but I was able to get one mortar off, and then the next dice was Dan's, and he did kill my platoon commander. After that, on the left flank, you can see the great conga line of conscripts is moving around this wall. Now, I did originally want to sort of sprint down Main Street, but these walls are actually quite, they're slowing me down quite a lot. So instead, I decided to go for the full 12-inch run around here rather than trying to sort of go 6 inches and so on and so forth. And the idea is that we've come down the center. Now we're breaking left, and we're going to use the cover to try and, especially the cover of the burning verbal wind, to try and get off the board. Whilst and we're just sprinting. There's no fire happening here. We're just sprinting. Just break through. Over on the middle, I actually successfully conduct a bayonet charge against the I keep saying air observer, artillery observer here, and I am able to get rid of him. It was a pretty difficult charge, that one, because the observer actually had the defended position, and that therefore he gets to strike first. And I was on a lot of pins, as you can see, but I was able to remove one of the pins thanks to For the Motherland. And then I was able to get them to do as they were told with the victory flag, which removed another pin when they passed the order. So they actually ended up going down to like 1 pin, which is pretty cool. And they managed to beat the air observer in combat. Good old bayonet charge. Never underestimate a Soviet conscript and his bayonet. But unfortunately, that squad then did get badly mashed from the enfilading fire of these 2 German veteran squads. And you can see what looked like it was going to be my strongest flank over here with the T-34s is actually going very, very badly now. The German defense here was impeccable. Really have to give it to Dan. He kept doggedly holding back the advance of the Soviets, and he actually really turned this around on this turn. The Puma actually came in for a point-blank shot on the T-34. I think he even managed to get a side shot on it, and he was able to knock it out. So despite the fact that my 2 T-34s have been just 2v1ing this Puma, it's actually managed to even the odds now, and it's looking very, very risky. And then I lost another T-34 this game to this Puma. So the German Armoured Corps, despite everything that's gone against it, losing the Wirbelwind, losing the Walking Stuka, they still show why they are the Panzer elite born to compete. As we get into the latter stages of this game, we enter turn 5 and it starts becoming a bit of a bloodbath. The Soviets started off so confidently and it just became such a bloodbath. The Germans get a rush of dice early on and they are able to take out this T-34-85 before it's able to strike. So the double Puma has actually beaten the triple T-34 in a straight-up tank duel, which is incredible. And then the German infantry here just continues to like scythe down the conscripts over here. Well, this infantry squad here actually is brutalizing these conscripts here. My Commissar is pushing forward like, come on, men, to victory, not one step backwards, forwards. Commissar, I have to say, looking particularly cinematic in this term. And then over here, the German infantry and the Puma start wanging rounds, strafing rounds into the desperate Soviet infantry on the left flank. Now, what happens on the left flank is I have an infantry squad here that manages to run, and I think it's just within 12 inches of the board edge, but it doesn't quite make it. It's about an inch out. And then they get heavily brutalized by this German squad and this lone German machine gunner as well, who's doing surprisingly well. So they don't quite make it off the board, which is really bad, because unless they get the first dice of next turn, there's only like 2 of them left, so they're probably going to die. But I am able to actually get the drop on the German platoon command squad here as well, because Dan used a lot of his early dice over here. And then I was able to get the drop on the German platoon command squad here. And even though they've got tough fighter, they actually rolled kind of poorly and I just stabbed them up. Again, I love doing Soviet conscript bayonet charges. It feels so cinematic. It feels so right. And it always, I don't know what it is, the dice gods always tend to reward the Soviet conscripts. I've been playing Bio Action for a long time. And even back in like version 2, when you got the free conscript squad, those free conscripts were always like the premier assault unit in every single game. So it's good to see that tradition still living on in version 3. And then you can see the platoon squad here is just running up behind. We're desperately just trying to run squads off the board on this flank. Turn 6 comes around and the Soviet forces are now reduced to a handful of scattered infantry elements. Now, I didn't quite manage to get this unit off the board. They were killed by the Germans when they pulled the first dice, but I did get the other big unit of conscripts off the board, and I brought this platoon command squad to here, hiding behind the wreck of the Wirbelwind, because that is line of sight blocking terrain. The wreck is it's completely impassable. You can't see over it and stuff like that. And I go for a desperate final push with the 3-man Commissar team and the 2 remaining conscripts, which somehow survived the storm of fire from the Germans. The Germans bring their infantry round to here, and they bring the Puma round to here. It's finished. It's finished with its meal. It's looking for dessert now, and it's going to come down. So that's turn 6, and at the end of turn 6, it's going to be a draw. It's going to be a draw, but we have to roll to see if it goes on to turn 7. Now, if it goes on to turn 7 and the Soviets manage to get the first few dice, then we'll be able to run this unit off, and that will get loads and loads of points in the bank. But we do roll, we do get the 4+, we do go to turn 7, and the Germans pull the first 2 dice out the bag. And unfortunately, the victory flag is destroyed before it manages to get off the board, and the 2 remaining conscripts here are destroyed before they get off the board. Now, with that, it is looking like a German victory, unless this platoon command squad can get off the board. Now, the thing is, it's inexperienced, and it has a pin on it at this point. So even with the platoon command squad benefiting from its own aura, it's leadership 9. And look, we've all failed a 1-pin order. To say my heart was in my mouth would be would be understating things. I roll the dice, and I kid you not, I roll exactly a 9. Exactly what I need to get off the board. And the platoon command squad runs off before the Puma can activate, and I'm able to get a few more points in the bag. And thanks to those additional points, thanks to that platoon commander getting off the board, it ended up being a draw overall. I think if it had ended turn 6, it would have been a draw with me ahead by 1 point. But the final score on turn 7 was a draw, but with Dan ahead by 1 point. But either way, it was a draw. And it came down to if that Puma had got the dice first, or if I'd failed that order check, Dan could have got a victory out of this. But as it was, it ended up just being an amazing game. Honestly, this might be one of my favorite games of bolt action I've ever played. And to get a game like that out of the start that we had, I think it really highlights the importance of remembering that there's a human being on the other side of the table, that you are going to have more epic moments, more memorable moments from a gentleman's game than from a cutthroat competitive game. And I have to say, this has really, really solidified in my mind the value of the gentleman's game. But here we are, game number 3 and the last battle of the event. And I get to play against another mate of mine, Simon, and he had his British. Simon is another regular of the bolt action group at Element Games, and I have also, like with Dan, had the pleasure of playing in some really big apocalypse games with him. Now, interestingly, I normally see Simon with his Germans, but like I said, today he was running his Brits. And in his list, he had roughly a couple of Piat teams, a big platoon command squad. He had 2 or 3 squads of regular infantry, a Bedford truck, a universal carrier, and he had 2 Cromwells and a Humber armoured car. The mission for this game was surrounded. One person starts in the middle of the board in a defensive position, and the other person is attacking. And I ended up losing the roll-off, and Simon wanted to attack, so I ended up in the defensive position. Now, how this works is Simon brings on half his force as part of a first wave, and then the other half comes in reserves. I deploy half of my army on the board, and the rest of it comes on as part of reserves. There is a special rule in this mission where you can come on from any board edge, but you can't come on from a board edge which your opponent has just brought reserves on. So for example, if I brought, let's say, a T-34 on this board edge, then Simon wouldn't be able to bring any of his reserves on from here, but he could come on along here, or along this edge, or along the edge over here. So my initial starting defense force, I went for all of my conscripts. The thinking was I really don't want to be trying to roll a leadership check to bring inexperienced units on reserve. In case you're not familiar with how it works about action, your units don't just come in from reserve. You have to pass a leadership test at -1. So with conscripts being leadership 8, I'd have to try and roll a 7 or below on 2 dice to bring them on. And that that is, let me tell you, it's unreliable. So instead, what I did is I had all of my regular units, most of my regular units in reserve. And then I started with most of my inexperienced stuff on the board because the regular units have got a better leadership. Naturally, sir, I adopted an all-round defense with units of conscripts holding each one of the barricades, and it felt only right to have my Commissar in the middle, leading the defense, not one step backwards, comrades, waving the victory flag around. And I also brought in a T-34. I didn't originally plan on having this on the board, but I started this on the board for 2 reasons. One, I wanted some anti-tank on the board that wasn't going to be reliant on passing a leadership test to come on. And 2, if it died, it would form some impassable terrain and hard cover, which would actually help fill in my defensive line. Now, what was really cool in this game, and I think it's a great display of karma. What goes around comes around. That's both positive and negative. Simon knew that my victory banner was pretty important and my Commissar was pretty important to keeping the defense and keeping my units doing what I wanted them to do. But we had a gentleman's agreement where as long as my Commissar didn't shoot one of his units, he wouldn't shoot me. He wouldn't shoot my Commissar. And that way the victory flag could stay in the center of the board, rallying the conscripts. But obviously the moment that I shot him, all bets would be off. But with my guys in their defensive positions, it was time for turn number 1. And this essentially consisted of Simon's first wave coming on the board. Now he went for a couple of squads coming on here. He's got one of his platoon command squads here and a rifle section, and he's got another rifle section over here as well. And then he has his 2 Cromwells coming on the board. Now, I was pretty lucky to get away with my T-34 not dying. It managed to tank a side shot from this Cromwell, and then this Cromwell came on and actually missed. Now, I did end up with quite a few pins on my army thanks to prep bombardments and stuff like that, but overall casualties were remarkably light on the first turn for both sides. Unfortunately for the Soviets, things would not stay that way in turn 2, as by the end of turn 2, all 3 of my T-34-85s were dead, essentially removing all of my anti-tank from the game. Oh dear. So what happened is Simon got the first activation with this T-34 and was able to put a side shot into with his Cromwell, I should say, and got a side shot of my T-34 and he got the hit, he got the pen, and he just destroyed it in pretty short order. I then managed to bring on one of my T-34s from reserve, and I missed on a 3-up. I missed a rear shot on his Cromwell. He then brought on his Cromwell then shot my T-34 back, but actually didn't manage to damage it. But then he brought on a Humber armored car, shot me in the rear, and was able to destroy that one. Simon then brought on his Bedford, which was loaded up with another infantry squad and like commanders and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, I need to get rid of this. So I brought on my T-34 and shot it in the side and was actually able to destroy it. And I actually killed one of the, I think it was one of the Piat teams as well. I did a lot of damage to the units getting out, so I was pretty happy with that. But I was a bit stupid about this because I sort of just wanged my T-34 on here. But that just meant that even though it had come on here, Simon could bring his Piat team on from the side and actually destroy it. If I'd been a bit cleverer and brought my T-34 on here, then I actually would have been able to destroy this Bedford and probably kept my T-34 alive. But there you go. That was most of the excitement, although Like I said, I did manage to do some good damage to the Bedford and its contents, and also I did get off a rather sterling conscript bayonet charge against this squad of regular infantry. So this was a squad of about 12 conscripts versus a squad of 7 British regulars. Now, we were striking at the same time, Simon having 7 attacks, wounding on 3s, and me having 12 attacks, wounding on 4s. And I was able to resoundly beat the British regulars with a good old bayonet charge. They don't like it, Upham! But that leads us into turn 3, and I'm in a bit of a pickle because I can't really destroy Simon's tanks now, but I can defeat his infantry. So what I do is I take all of my conscripts and I reorganize them from defense into attack, and I basically go for a big push down here. I'm not quite able to get any charges off, but I do a lot of moving and a lot of shooting, and that does allow me to do some pretty decent casualties to the various British infantry units over here. I also am able to bring on a platoon commander, and he comes in and destroys one of the small British teams over here, either the light mortar or the Piat, I can't quite remember. He then is destroyed in turn. I think it is the light mortar. He is then destroyed in turn, but it does save me from that indirect fire. Interestingly, from the British perspective, they are kind of slightly out of position with a lot of their armor now. And so they end up bringing the Cromwells around here and going after the mortars. But thanks to a combination of going down and intervening cover, I'm actually able to survive the Cromwell fire pretty effectively. But with the turns coming thick and fast, it was time for round 4. And as you can see, I was set up for a glorious Soviet conscript bayonet charge. Fixed bayonets! Show them steel! Show them contempt! Hoorah! Forwards, comrades! Forwards! I charged and charged and charged again. The British counterattacked with their own bayonet charge. Fixed bayonets, lads! But in the end, there could be only one victor in the bloody melee that was round 4. And after the dust had settled, this is what it looked like. And yes, it may seem like the Soviets have been roundly tabled, nearly wiped off the board, but as you can see, the vitally important strategic rickety wooden fence was in our hands, comrades. So on a serious note, this game was basically over on round 4. I mean, it was basically over when all the T-34s died. But Simon and I did have a really cool back and forth over this barricade, because I'd charge one unit in, take casualties so he'd get to fight first, but then rout his unit. But then he would then charge me. Similar things would happen. And so back and forth. And, you know, between I think Simon had like 2 platoon command, had a platoon command squad, and he had like a weapons team, and he had a couple of big units of infantry. Some of them have been a bit damaged though. And then I had my 3 Soviet conscript squads and my Commissar. Between all of that, it ended up being that I was able to take the barricade and secure the moral victory, as it were. But, of course, that led to horrific casualties, and there wasn't much left on the board after the Soviets had done their glorious charge. But if you look at the actual kills here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the Brits and 7 to the Soviets. So in terms of like game score, it's actually neck and neck. But the problem is this is happening on turn 4, which means it's a turn 5 and a turn 6 for the Brits to essentially mop up. And that is essentially what they do on turn 5 and 6. The Cromwells come round here, and over the course of a couple of turns, they're able to pick up these mortar teams without much effort. These mortars had been struggling to really achieve anything this game. Maybe they should have started on the board, but then the conscript would have had to try and charge on, so that would have been a bit difficult. The only thing that is worth sort of mentioning, the highlight as it were, is there was actually another charge by Simon to try and secure the victory flag. Because truly, unless you have the victory flag, you haven't got victory. And he charged in with one of his platoon commanders or officers, or I can't quite remember. But he charged in with this 3-man squad that had three Sten guns, and we actually killed each other to a man. Because I got to fight first, but I only killed like one guy, and then he fought and was able to kill two. Then we fought at the same time, and I was able to kill two of his guys, but then obviously they got a chance to strike, and they were able to kill two of my guys. So by the time the dust had settled, no one controlled the victory flag, and the only model that I had left at the end of the game was Boris, my heavy weapon team platoon commander. And Simon and I had a bit of a joke that, Simon got the actual victory, but because he didn't ever actually get an infantry squad to capture the flag, then after, Boris sort of just hid down here behind this building, waited for the Brits to move off, and then he ran in and he captured, and he reclaimed, I should say, the victory flag for the Soviet Union. In the end, this was a victory for the British, a well-earned one, although it was surprisingly close, with me still being able to get 8 dice off the British, and I had 12 dice in my army, and they eventually got 11 dice off me in total. So I didn't lose by any massive margin whatsoever, and maybe if things had gone a little bit differently on the tank front, perhaps I could have secured a draw or a victory. But with game 3 over, the tournament comes to an end, and I had managed to get 2 draws and a minor loss, which I am very, very happy with, because I feel like I brought quite a fluffy and thematic list for the Soviets, and I was just pretty pleased with being able to take that into an event and for it to do okay. But overall, the main lessons learned from this is that the people that I played against, all of them were just an absolute pleasure. Mark, Dan, and Simon, you guys are absolutely great, and I would happily play against any one of you guys again, and again. And I think it was also really cool seeing the Soviet book show off what it can do. In pretty much every game, my special rules were coming up. There were quite a few times when a unit would take 50% casualties, but then between like the victory flag and the platoon commander giving out some pretty good leadership buffs, and the fact that I also had great patriotic war, which gives me rerolls on my break tests on infantry and artillery, it meant that my conscripts, who should have really folded like wet paper, actually ended up having to be killed to a man, and very rarely did they break and flee. Also, my conscripts were pretty reliable in terms of doing their orders. There were 1 or 2 times when they failed, but no more so than when I run regular or even veteran infantry. And again, that just goes to show, because the Soviets have got those morale boosts now, and they also have the Commissar for the reroll orders. The Soviets have got rerolls coming out the wazoo. You've got rerolls on your orders, rerolls on your break tests, and I also found it very, very helpful having the for the motherland rule. I thought that would be terrible. When I've seen it before, when I've sort of when I had it in the rule book, I didn't rate it at all, but I never really used it. But in these missions, and with me being much more aggressive, I must have lost double digits of pins for basically free over the course of this event, which is very, very important when you are running a low leadership army like mine. And so overall, I thought the victory flag was great. I thought the not one step back was great. I thought Great Patriotic War was great. I thought the for the motherland was great. All of my special rules came up consistently throughout nearly every game in the event, and it really hammered home to me how resilient a Soviet force is. You can look at the Soviets and you can see a lot of their units and you can think that they're kind of basic, there's not a lot going on there, but they're a really, really, really good example of how you can take generic units and then layer these army special rules on top to make them much, much more interesting, much more powerful, and much more capable. In summary, I loved playing with the new Armies of the Soviet Union book, and I genuinely mean it. This may become my new main faction for bolt action. Just waves of conscripts and hordes of tanks. It's just me all over. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What did you think of the army list that I ran, the armies that I got to play against, and what did you think of the new Soviets? How do you think their performance was, and how would you run them in the future? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Picklock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.